Shall we get started? I'm going to call today's special meeting of Saanich Council to order on Tuesday, July 21st. The special meeting is for the purpose of a public hearing. Following the public hearing, Council will pass a motion to move to the in-camera meeting. The public hearing procedure is as follows. The clerk will introduce the item, following which Council will be given an opportunity to ask questions of staff. I will then request the applicant to present his proposal to Council and to the public. Following the applicant's presentation, I will call a total of 3 times for those persons wishing to be heard, either in favor or in opposition to the application. If you wish to speak on the item being considered, please come up to the microphone, state your name and address, and then give your comments. Once the call for public input has been given 3 times consecutively, no further representation for the public can be considered. Madam Clerk, what is the limit during a public hearing for speaking? Is it unlimited?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The time limit is a little bit undefined certainly, but in the interest of ensuring that all speakers have an opportunity, it would be ideal for them to keep their comments to the point and as succinct as they can. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. After all persons wishing to address council have been heard, I will then ask the applicant to respond to any questions, new information, or factual matters raised by the speakers. Once the applicant has been provided with an opportunity to respond, I will then close the public hearing and ask council to debate the matter. The clerk will now introduce the first item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This first item is official community plan bylaw 2003, amendment number 9342. The intent of the proposed bylaw is to amend the sewer service area policies contained in the official community plan and in the rural Saanich local area plan to allow consideration of expansions to the sewer service area outside the urban containment boundary for public facilities or parks where there would be a significant community benefit. This amendment would allow consideration of an application for inclusion of 2 sites at Elk and Beaver Lake Regional Park for sewer inclusion into the sewer service area in order to construct new washroom facilities. Council is in receipt of reports of the Director of Engineering and the Director of Planning dated September 24th, 2013 and April 23rd, 2015, recommending an amendment to the official community plan policy 4.2.10.13 and rural Saanich local area plan policy 11.1 as outlined, and all further recommending inclusion of the proposed washroom sites in Elk and Beaver Lake Regional Park and the old filter bed in the sewer service area. Council is also in receipt of one further piece of correspondence that has come in since the publication of the agenda. That is the extent, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I'll open it up to council to ask any questions of staff before I call upon the applicant. Seeing none, I'll call the applicant forward at this time.
Mayor and Council, my name is Jeff Ward, and I work with Capital Regional District Parks, and I manage the Planning, Resource Management and Development Group. The proposal that we've submitted to District of Saanich is to provide for a wastewater connection to the community sewer line, so that we were able to service our washing facilities at Beaver Beach and also at the filter beds. This proposal and work we're doing is part of a larger investment that we're making in infrastructure in Elk Beaver Lake Regional Park. Last year we've upgraded a dam on Colquitt's Creek. We're proposing to upgrade the filter beds, washroom, and also eventually washrooms at Beaver Beach, Hampstead, and Eagle. The facility that we have right now at Beaver Beach is a holding tank that we pump out regularly throughout the year, and also a tank at filter bed. So both those would be replaced by the connection to the sewer lines. And in conjunction with that, we will rebuild the filter beds washroom. Ben Martin, who is with Capital Regional District Engineering Services, as a project engineer for the work, will provide you with an engineering overview of the project.
Hello, I'm Ben. I'll be the project engineer with this project. So just a brief overview of the system that we're looking at. I don't know if council has seen this. I don't know if that helps. We've looked at, we've sort of come to this, we've looked at 2 potential routes to connect to the Saanich sewer. Both routes incorporate a semi-positive displacement grinder pump system, low pressure, flexible, minimal impact to the environment. It doesn't need to be very, very, very deep, etc. Basically, we'll be connecting the Beaver Beach and the filter bed sites, and then running out south, likely through pipeline to a connection there. We have presented 2 options here. We haven't determined the specific tie-in location with Saanich yet in terms of capacity and preference on that side. So we've looked at both options. Thank you.
I'll now open it up to public input. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Calling for a second time, any members of the public who wish to speak? Calling for a third time? All right, I'll close the public input period, and I go to council for decision. Councilor Bryce.
I move the recommendation.
Discussion, Councilor Bryce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item has been before council on numerous occasions. It has subsequently gone out for public consultation. I did have an opportunity to attend the consultation, and CRD staff provided information to any nearby residents who had an interest in this. The question has been raised in the past, did the CRD consider compostable toilets? And they did. But the wonderful news is that the park and beach is overwhelmingly enjoyed by so many thousands of people that that option just wasn't practical. So I think that it's pretty obvious that this is going to be an improvement, and one that is not going to disrupt the surrounding area, and one that certainly justifies our extending the sewer service area to include this.
Thank you. Councilor Dermott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. I agree with what Councilor Bryce has said, and also the fact that this is really a long overdue upgrade to the facilities in the park that is heavily used by the public. I think any indications we have, or input we have had from the public, have indicated broad support for this, and the fact that there is nobody out here to object this evening, I think reflects that. So I'm more than happy to support this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Plant, you had your
Yes, I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if I could ask Ben to come back. I just have a question regarding the routing. You referenced that it potentially could either go out via pipeline or out to Elk Lake Drive. I've been kind of involved as when I was the community association president, and the discussion then was it hadn't been determined. So I'm wondering, you're at least a year and a half into this project and you haven't determined which way it's going to go, whether or not it's going to go out to Elk Lake or down via pipeline. Can you give me an update on what the process is for making your decision?
From a technical point of view, and also from a social impact point of view, we wanted to hear from the public some of the concerns. So what we did hear from going south through the pipeline was potential limitation of use and the risk to the creek. Both of those items we can work with and factor in if we were to go that route. What I haven't done, and we haven't done, is have a specific conversation about what we anticipate and forecast for use and flow, and where Saanich would prefer to have that connection. Another piece that's somewhat new is that there is a development, I believe, on the table at Elk Lake, or at the Westerly connection, Elk Lake Drive, and that has some capacity issues too that we weren't quite aware of. We don't know where that is. So from a technical and risk point of view, we can work with either option. Some of the more nuts and bolts of it, there is some unknown bedrock along the pipeline route that could impact our cost, but that would be, we would look at that before possibly talking with Saanich about where they would prefer to have the ultimate time.
Thank you. So question again through you, Mr. Mayor, to you, Ben, if you don't mind. So are you saying that you will come back to Saanich again to ask for which route we prefer after you've done the analysis? Or am I misunderstanding what you're saying?
I was envisioning a consultation with the engineering staff for the specific time point.
Okay. I think the endeavor to protect the watershed, or the creek rather, through that pipeline does make me believe that route out to Elk Lake is preferable. The ability to trench on a narrow, as you discussed, on that service road, to do a narrow trench so that the tree roots aren't as disruptive there as the potential for the creek made me think that's the route to go. I'm not an engineer, but I do think if you're looking for some feedback, that's mine out to the Elk Lake. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Haynes, you had your hand up.
I'd just like to concur with my colleagues. This is a very well-used park. I use it myself with my family. Certainly moving to improved washroom facilities will be something that will be enjoyed by our residents, and I support this proposal going forward. Thank you.
Is there any more discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the motion. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Someone come forward a motion for second reading of bylaw number 9342.
Second reading.
Second.
Discussion on that, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Third reading,
Move third reading.
Second.
call the question on that. All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried unanimously. Thank you. With that, we'll move to the second item on the agenda. Madam Clerk, could you please introduce it for us?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This next item is zoning bylaw 2003, amendment bylaw 2015, number 9343. This bylaw amendment is to rezone Lot 1 of Plan 5369, which is 1516 Mount Douglas Cross Road, from RS 18 to RS 10 for the purpose of subdivision in order to create 14 bare land strata lots and 2 fee simple lots for single-family dwelling use. A development variance permit will be considered to allow variances for relaxation of lot depth. A covenant will also be considered, as well as an application to exclude the parcel from the agricultural land reserve and include the lands in the sewer service area. Council is in receipt of reports of the Director of Planning dated June 8, 2015 and June 15, 2015, recommending approval of the rezoning and development permit, recommending approval of the inclusion of the property in the sewer service area, that final reading of the zoning bylaw amendment and sewer service area bylaws and ratification of the development variance permit be withheld pending inclusion, ALC inclusion of the site from the ALR and registration of a covenant to secure minimum built green gold or equivalent energy and environmental performance standards, recommending $100,000 to Saanich for trail improvements in Mount Doug Park, and registration of building scheme with guidelines pertaining to the size, location, and design of dwellings. And further, that council provide comments, and this was a secondary piece, that council would be asked to provide recommendation further to the agricultural land reserve application and provide direction to staff as to when that application would be sent. Council is also in receipt of a letter from the applicant dated July 2nd, 3 letters from the Gordon Head Residents Association commenting on the application, 13 letters from residents. That is the extent, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Before I ask the applicant to come forward, does the council have any questions for staff? Councilor Plant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question through you to our planning director this evening, and this is a bit philosophical, and because I haven't been through a lot of public hearings yet. My understanding is after third reading, we are to receive no further information. And yet, after we give third reading this time, we are going to get information from the ALC that this land has been included. So I'm wondering, I think this is kind of a procedurally unique situation, but I'm wondering if you can advise us how we can receive this information and yet not break any protocol about receiving information after third reading. And perhaps my question should have gone to the Legislative Director, Mr. Mayor.
That was going to be my suggestion. To the Director of Legislative Services.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's really no different than a rezoning that would require approval from the Ministry of Highways, for example, prior to final reading. So council, if they were to approve it, give it second and third reading, staff undertake to send the bylaw through to the province. If the province approves it, it comes back to staff. Staff then would go ahead and put the bylaw on for final reading and just let council know that all of the outstanding requirements have in fact been met. So there's often outstanding items like a covenant that must be entered into. These are all done at the staff level. The piece that becomes problematic was if council was to have further input from the public that would potentially give them new information that may change their mind about the decision that they made. So if that was to happen, and we had a situation going back many years, where there was some additional information that came along, and in fact, council decided to reopen the public hearing. But this is considered a procedural type of situation, as opposed to getting new information from the public that might change your mind on the decision.
Great, thank you. That put my mind at ease. Thank you.
Councilor Workman, a question for staff.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Question to planning. The new EDPA bylaw, does it apply to farms as far as protection?
Thank you. Agricultural land reserve lands have the right to farm, so if the taking down the trees or doing alterations to a farm parcel for the purpose of farming, for that reason they would be able to remove trees and whatnot. So in terms of applicability, it's somewhat varies in terms of what you're trying to do with the land.
Okay, I've got three short questions. They sort of tie together. Does a farm need to fence off protected areas?
I'm not aware of that requirement, no.
Okay, next question. When the applicant applied for a 16-lot subdivision recently, were there any areas that needed protection? Up until the application, it was a farm. And at the time of application, were there any areas that needed protection? Or were we going back a couple of years to what was? You know where I'm
Through
going
the
with
chair, we're having a bit of a discussion, but neither the planning manager or myself are the ones who actually oversee the EDPA area, and if we're going back several years, we wouldn't necessarily have that information to provide council tonight. As our planning manager was indicating, where a property is within the agricultural land reserve, there are a number of regulations that a municipality may adopt that wouldn't necessarily apply. And so for us to give you the exact sort of ins and outs of how it may have been looked at in this case, we wouldn't have that information to give you in the moment.
I guess what concerns me, if I can just make the comment, over the last 20 years, I've seen a lot of applications go through. In this one here, I believe we end up with one of the poorest subdivisions I've ever seen, and it does concern me. I think I said the wrong thing here, but if I can continue.
Actually, Councilor Brookman, if you have this a moment in time for asking questions of staff and less for making comments about the application.
Okay,
Please.
I apologize for that. But my question was, when the applicant applied for subdivision, it was a farm. And at the time of the application for the 16-lot subdivision, were there protected areas that we wanted to protect? Or were we going back to what was a couple of years ago? It doesn't seem like it seems like an obvious question. Did we have anything to protect when he applied? I rest my case. Okay. Thank you.
With that, I'll ask the applicant to move to come to the microphone. Please come forward.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Roger Tinney. I'm the project planner for the application this evening. With me, the same as when we were at the committee of the whole on June 22nd, the full contingent of the team is here, and the front row is the Alberta family. And behind them, Patrick Lucy of Aquatex, the project biologist. Next to him is Dan Boot, the project designer, and adjacent to him is Jeremy Jai, the project arborist, and everyone's available to answer questions if there are during the course of the evening. Take a minute to start up the PowerPoint presentation for me. The last time we were here was June 22nd, Committee of the Whole, and perhaps for the benefit of the audience and some of those who weren't here, I'm going to quickly go back through more or less the same presentation that was given on the 22nd. The property is, probably doesn't need a great deal of introduction. It's a 4-acre piece of property. 1516 Mount Doug Cross Road is the frontage, and there's also a secondary access at the back of the property off Bloomfield Crescent. Property is zoned RS18 single family, and it's also in the agricultural land reserve. Going back roughly 4 years ago to 2011, it was the first application. It was for a 16-lot subdivision. And I think, as most people know who've been following along the application from the beginning, that application was rejected. Roughly a year later, a second application came forward, similar in many ways, but different certainly at the Mount Doug Road frontage. And for those of you who were on council at the time, or members of the public that followed along, you'll remember that a community garden was proposed for the front of the property, and that didn't go over particularly well. We thought that it was perhaps a bit of a hybrid type proposal where it allowed residential subdivision while maintaining a component of agriculture. But a lot of people don't view community gardens as being all that compatible in a residential setting, and as a result, that application was rejected as well. The Allbergs were then faced with some tough decisions. Those two slides that I just quickly glanced over represented over 2 years' worth of work and tens of thousands of dollars of application fees and design. And the question that they were beginning to ask themselves is, do we give up and sell the property, or do we just put it on the back burner for a while and do nothing? Do we come forward with yet a third application, or is it time to pursue farming, which many people, including some of the council members, thought was most appropriate for the property? And as you know, option 4 was the one that they chose, and being farmers and cattle farming family, it's not surprising that cattle was pursued. I put this slide in for the benefit of everyone, and perhaps again for members of the public who are relatively new to the application. It's a little bit of a chronology that you can follow along as to where the application had been. The second rezoning application, which was the community garden, was rejected in July 2012. In February 2013 is when the cattle arrived on the site. And at that time, it was the intent of the applicant, or the family, to pursue farming for the foreseeable future. After 2 fairly sound rejections and a great deal of expenditure to set up the cattle operation, which was about $150,000 to $175,000, the intent was to farm for quite some time. But as you can see, the third rezoning application was submitted in March 2014, roughly a year later. And that was very much at the urging of the neighborhood. They were not at all pleased with the cattle operation in a residential setting in Gordon Head. And I won't belabor the point, but I think most of you know what the issues were from the neighbors, and some of them were here and spoke on the committee of the whole meeting on June 22nd. So that prompted the family to move forward with the third application, as I mentioned, which was on March 2014. The application then sort of treaded water for a little while until May 2015, and thanks to Councillor Haynes sort of being the catalyst for moving it forward. I won't get into the minutiae of all the details this evening, but again, for the members of the public, there's a procedure in place in the municipality for dealing with rezoning and ALR applications. And that procedure is that the ALR portion of the application is dealt with first, and then the rezoning application dealt with second. And after 2 significant rejections, the family, understandably, was quite concerned about following that procedure, because the concern being that if it went to the ALR and was brought out of the ALR, which we knew with almost full certainty that it was going to be, because there's 2 letters on record from the Land Commission already saying that they support the removal of the property from the ALR. Then it went back to council and was to get rejected a third time. Then the Allbergs were in a very difficult position where they can no longer farm the property because it's been removed from the ALR and there's no development potential. So there was quite a bit of back and forth and quite a bit of discussion amongst Sandwich's legal staff and the family's legal staff, and finally an agreement was reached to move forward and deviate from the process and deal with the rezoning application first, which is how we really got here this evening. As a result of that agreement from council, the family agreed to move the cattle from the property, and that was on June 4th, 2015. As you know, we were at the committee of the whole, and it was approved, and brings us here this evening for a public hearing and hopefully the final visit to council. One of the items that Councillor Werblin had just touched on before the presentation was the EDPA, and that was a new item that was introduced fairly late in the process for us, in the sense that we started this back in 2011. So the first two applications that were dealt with by Council didn't involve any EDPA discussion. That came on quite late in the process, roughly in 2013. And again, that was an item that not only affected this property, but affected many properties in the municipality. And it was a fairly significant undertaking to deal with it. It was primarily Patrick Lucy and his team at Aquatex that was tasked with dealing with this. And it was quite time-consuming and quite expensive before the Aquatex team and the environmental planner at Saanich finally agreed as to what the boundaries of the EDPA should be and whether this property was or wasn't a sensitive ecosystem. And again, it's a big subject, and if anybody really wants to delve into it during the presentation, Patrick Lucy can elaborate on that for you. As we move forward with this third application, many of the items remain the same from the previous two. The agrologist report was essentially the same. Soil conditions were very poor. A rating between 5 and 7 was given. High bedrock and not suitable for land-based agriculture.